My name is Rimamnde Shawulu. This is the other side. Today we are talking about Kano, evidently one of the most populated states in the country, one of the most politically vibrant states in Nigeria, a state which played a great role in the First Republic, in the Second Republic, and as well, the role that Kano used to play before does not appear to be what Kano used to be. Let me put it in another way. It does appear that the prominence of Kano in Nigeria's politics has reduced very drastically since we began this republic in 1999. For those who know a little bit of Nigeria's history, in the First Republic, Kano was a hotspot for radical politics. You had people like the late Lawan Danbazau, Moody speaking. You had people like Malam Aminu Kano and several radicals who bestrode the city and became very popular across Nigeria. And Kano gave birth to the NEPU as well as the seat that finally came to be called the United Middle Belt Congress. And in the Second Republic, the Kano too played a very prominent political role. And the role was so strong that Kano became the epicenter of radical politics. And when the late Bala Mohammed was killed by a mob after Governor Abubakar Remi took some radical decisions on the emirate in Kano, the commissioner Bala Mohammed became so popular across the whole country, even outside Nigeria. Anything that happened in Kano was what everybody was interested in. The People's Redemption Party held power for 4 years, and these 4 years made Kano to be very, very strong across the whole country. But what has happened since then when we came into the current dispensation? It is interesting to note that Kano is still the second biggest voting population in Nigeria. Just take a look at the PVCs collected for the 2023 elections. The only state that collected more voting cards than Kano is Lagos State. Lagos State collected 7,060,195 voting cards. Kano collected 5,921,370 cards. It's evident from the statistics that Kano has a very important role to play in who becomes the president of Nigeria. Well, that was before the current republic. If we look at what has happened since 1999, Kano, of the 7 cycles of election, Kano voted only 3 times for the persons who eventually emerged as winners in the presidential election. In 1999, Kano voted for President Olusegun Obasanjo, giving him 74% of the votes. In 2015, Kano voted for President Muhammadu Buhari, giving him 89.4% of the votes. And in 2019 again, Kano delivered 75.5% of his votes to President Muhammadu Buhari. Outside these 2 former military presidents, Kano has not voted for any other candidate who eventually became president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Or in other words, let me make it clearer. Kano did not vote for the person who eventually emerged as winner in 4 other elections. In 2003, Kano gave 75% of his votes, that is 1,628,085 votes, to General Muhammadu Buhari, who lost the election. Olusegun Obasanjo, OBJ, who had won Kano in the previous election with 682,255 votes, got only 492,755 votes in 2023. That is just 22%. He did not even make 25% in Kano. In 2007, President Yaradua contested, then Governor Yaradua contested against General Muhammadu Buhari, and Atiku Abubakar contested with the help of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu for the position of the presidency. Kano gave President Muhammadu Buhari 1,079,240 votes. The person who eventually became president got 672,318 votes, presenting 36.7% of the votes. Vice President Atiku Abubakar got 47,420 votes, representing 2.6% of the votes in Kano. And in 2011, the ACN again fielded Nuhu Ribadu as its presidential candidate. And the leader of the party, as you recall, was President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Nuhu Ribadu scored 42,353 votes, representing 1.6% of the votes. The CPC, whose candidate was General Muhammadu Buhari, got 543 votes, representing 60.8% of the votes. The person who eventually won that election, President Goodluck Jonathan, 440,666 votes, representing 16.5%, meaning he did not even get the 25% requirement. In 2015, the second time that Kano voted for a presidential candidate, Muhammadu Buhari, the APC candidate, scored 1,903,999 votes, representing 89.4%, while President Goodluck Jonathan, who lost the election, got 179 votes, representing 10.1%. In 2019, President Muhammadu Buhari scored 75.5% of the votes. He won 1,464,768 votes in his PDP rival, Vice President Atiku Abubakar. In the election, Vice President Atiku got 309,593 votes, representing 20.7%, less than 25%. And then in 2023, the APC candidate, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, scored 506,412 votes, representing 29% of the votes from Kano. Vice President Atiku Abubakar scored 131,716 votes, representing 7% of the votes. 58% of the votes went to Engineer Rabiu Kwankwaso of the New Nigeria People's Party. He scored 997,279 votes. And just a recap, in the 7 election cycles that we've had, Kano has voted for the winning candidates only 3 times. He voted for President Olusegun Obasanjo in 1999, and then President Muhammadu Buhari in 2015 and 2019. In 2023, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu got 29%. Majority of the votes went to Engineer Rabiu Kwankwaso, the former governor of the state, who was born in 1956, Nigerian politician who had been governor of the state from 1999 to 2003 when he lost the election. Was thereafter appointed minister by President Olusegun Obasanjo. He worked in the Ministry of Defense. In 2007, he went back to Kano to take over the seat of the governor, which had been taken from him. And then in 2015, he came to the Senate as a senator. But before then, Rabiu Kwankwaso had been a member of the National Assembly. As a matter of fact, in 1990, he was elected Deputy Speaker in the House of Representatives. The Speaker then was from the East, somewhere from the East. I remember, if I remember correctly. Now, what is the implication of this for the people in Kano State? It does appear that, so too like Lagos in some kind of way, the biggest voting blocks in Nigeria appear not to be using their votes to effect the change that they seek to effect. As a matter of fact, if you look at the results of the 2023 elections, it will look like the votes that were scored by the NPP presidential candidate, that is Engineer Mohammed Rabiu Musa Kwankwaso, will appear to have been a loss to both parties, that is to both the APC and to the PDP. If the votes had been added to the PDP, it may have made a world of difference. And if the votes had been added to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, the votes would have made a lot of difference. And so the question people are asking today is will Kano continue on the trajectory that its votes do not count in any elections? If you look at how Kano has voted, one thing is very clear that Kano, like most parts of Nigeria, is very ethnic. It does not vote outside certain lines that have been drawn by the politics and sentiments of the area. Even when President Olusegun Obasanjo won elections in Kano in 1999, the fact of the matter from the statistics show that either the people in Kano were not interested in the candidates, as it was the case in the 1993 elections, when Kano recorded some of the lowest votes ever cast in a presidential election. Even though in Kano State, a candidate of the SDP is Chief MKO Abiola won the election, but he won the election with very low votes against his very unpopular Kano rival, Bashir Tofa. And Bauchi State then, with a much, much lower population, produced more votes than Kano in that election, or especially the votes that were received by Bashir Tofa. So the question to ask, coming towards 2027, it does appear that if Rabiu Kwankwaso decides to pitch his tent with President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, this theoretically will increase the visibility or the votes that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu may receive in Kano. But it's not a place from its history where what one leader says goes. It will appear that the sentiments that will prevail around the north then may work very well in Kano. And for now, I can't really be sure how that is going to pan out to be. So the question to keep asking is, what role has Kwankwaso been playing in Nigeria's politics, especially this time? What are the things that are motivating him? Is he going to reduce the votes that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu will get? Or as some people said concerning the last election, that they were afraid that the strategy of the Tinubu campaign was that they were not sure how Kano votes will go. So strategic support was given to the NNPP so that it should take away the votes that may have gone to the PDP if Kwankwaso had not contested the election. But if Kwankwaso does contest the election in 2027, is it a guarantee that the people in Kano will simply follow him and vote for President Bola Ahmed Tinubu because he said so? Or what might be the case? Will the prevailing sentiments in the area, the poverty that people are complaining about, and the complaints that the current government has not treated the North fairly, play a role? Such a role that even if Kwankwaso decides to go into the APC and become its vice presidential candidate, he might not be able to go with the votes and the sentiments that are prevailing in the area. Well, what are the long-term implications of the way Kano has voted? Kano is supposed to be the leader of the North, so to say, in terms of its population, in terms of the fact that the politics in Kano has been politics of ideas that sometimes blur the lines between religion and radicalism. Is it Kano going to play the role of the leader, or it will continue the trajectory which it has started in 2023, namely that its votes will be irrelevant to both the person that wins and the immediate runner-up? What are your views? What do you think will be going through the minds of Governor Rabiu Kwankwaso? Does he want to run the election as a vice presidential candidate to Tinubu? Will Tinubu accept him as a vice presidential candidate? And even if Tinubu accepts him as a vice presidential candidate, will the people in Kano follow him? Or will the people in Kano do what Kano people are known for? That is being very radical and taking radical decisions. This is the other side. My name is Rimamnde Shawulu.